Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers.
And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 16, Episode 74. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Wednesday, Steelers Nation. And Dave, it's a busy day, maybe a little less so for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're off today, but busy around the NFL. 40 career matchups between John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin. It ended Sunday night. That chapter seemingly closed. The Baltimore Ravens firing John Harbaugh yesterday. And now maybe there's a chance down the road where they meet again. Harbaugh probably going to get a coaching job here. But that chapter of Steelers, Ravens, Tomlin, Harbaugh, iconic rivalry has closed. And so I know we're not going to be Ravens Depot, but it's a major relevant AFC North and Steelers story what we want to lead off with today. So, Dave, that is the news. How you doing?
All right. Happy Wednesday to you. And we're going to try to nurse Alex through. He's got this lingering poor guy cough that he's going through here. So please kind of bear with us. The good thing is the two of us have had a little bit of sleep now at this point, coming off of the obviously the late Sunday night game and everything that followed after that there. But yeah, the big story on this Wednesday morning is obviously the Baltimore Ravens parting ways with John Harbaugh, and that closes the chapter on quite a run there since 2008. And yeah, for you look back, you think back in your head, 40 career meetings between Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin, and Mike Tomlin just did eke him out there into head-to-head matchups, and I think they were 2-2 against each other in the playoffs on top of it. And what a lot of memorable games those two guys produced, with obviously the finale between the two coming down to a missed Tyler Loop field goal on Sunday night there. And if Loop makes that, obviously Harbaugh's going on, and people are kind of wondering still if that would have been the end of Mike Tomlin. Maybe, is today that we're talking about Mike Tomlin being out, but all of the stuff kind of leading up to that game, the result of and it's mostly speculating anyway, but the common theme has been that Mike Tomlin's job was safe regardless would have happened Sunday night. Less so, I think, on the side of the Ravens there. I got to admit, even though I knew there was a possibility of it, and I was still surprised by the news. I thought maybe they'd roll it back at least one more time, but with Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson, it does kind of make you kind of wonder some of the stuff leading up the last couple of weeks, and this kind of parlays on that article that Mike Preston had wrote in the Baltimore Sun about maybe there was some friction between Lamar Jackson and Harbaugh and all. But the Ravens, I guess who's the Biscotti and Harbaugh had the meeting, I guess, yesterday, and it came to the conclusion that it was time to part ways there. And I doubt Harbaugh will be without a job very long with all these openings around the NFL, and it'll be interesting to see where he lands. And obviously it'll be interesting to see which way the Ravens move forward here. So yeah, quite the news story yesterday.
Already reported interest from the Giants and the Dolphins, who still have a head coach in Mike McDaniel, but they are apparently exploring the idea of bringing in John Harbaugh. Just a very minor stickler point, but some prominent, not insiders, but people on Twitter, analysts and blue check mark accounts are saying that Tomlin and Harbaugh met 44 career times. That is incorrect. It's 40, including playoffs. If you Google and use AI, it'll tell you 44, but that is incorrect. That's why we always check our work over here. So just a minor point of clarification there for anyone who might be confused by us saying 40 career matchups. But Dave, as Mike Tomlin says, this applies to coaches and not just players. There's a fine line between drinking wine and squashing grapes. And if Luke makes that field goal, Harbaugh advances. Who knows what his fate would have been after the season? Reportedly, the reasons for his firing was basically twofold beyond just the lack of team success in recent years. But one, the locker room was starting to tune him out. And then two, his refusal to fire offensive coordinator Todd Monken, who's up for some head coaching jobs. So take that for whatever it's worth. Seems to be the reason for Harbaugh's ouster that came as a surprise to even some assistant coaches, apparently, who thought his job was going to be pretty safe. So who will Baltimore replace him with? It's their first coaching search since 2008. Harbaugh was the second longest tenured coach in the NFL, of course, only behind Mike Tomlin. Some reporting about Jesse Minter, the Chargers DC, Brian Flores, the Vikings DC, and if it was Flores, if he becomes the head coach, it'll be notable because there are many who still wish Brian Flores was in Pittsburgh right now. So we'll see what the Ravens search leads them.
Yeah, and then obviously, Flores has been a head coach before and was kind of, I guess, I don't know, how was he viewed in Miami? Abrasive and not so much, I guess, a player's coach there. And then you look at Jesse Minter. The interesting thing, I guess, about and it makes sense, obviously. And Ravens fans are now at this point are kicking themselves that Mike McDonald got away, and obviously the success he's having over there in Seattle. But the thing with Minter is, he's got ties to the Harbaugh family, right? Was the ties to Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, and but they call, they say that oftentimes the head coaching cycle can be ancestral, I guess, to some degree, and everybody's usually, there's you look hard enough, you can draw links and parallels to other coaches and all. That would obviously make sense, and you would think that they would want to probably go on the younger side, and John Harbaugh was obviously a first-time NFL head coach when the Ravens hired him. So, will they try to go down that path again? Some people are throwing out, I guess Stefanski as a possibility. Will they go defense? Will they go offense? I mean, and look, I mean, the head coaching prospects out there aren't very enticing overall. I know Kingsbury, kind of walked away from his job with the Cardinals there, and his Commanders, and probably gonna I guess he looks pretty good as a head coach candidate right now, all things considered, but it isn't overly a great crop. Not a lot of them feels like it's coming in from the college ranks, at least this offseason here. And yeah, we'll have to see how it turns out here. But I think it is easy to draw a line to mentor. I just, beyond that, could it be, I mean, who could it be other than Mentor?
Flores is also, like I said, been talked about to maybe a defensive-minded coach for a defense in Baltimore that has underachieved, especially this season. But we'll see. Their search is just getting started, and it's their first search in almost 2 decades. And so they're probably trying to calibrate and make sure that they're taking this process appropriately. It's interesting, Dave. When Pittsburgh has hired their coaches, granted as rare as that is, 3 since 1969, how many ties to the organization has there really been? Tomlin had, I was thinking about this last night, Tomlin had virtually no ties to the organization, correct? There wasn't really any commonality between him and Pittsburgh previously.
I mean, the whole Dungy link, I guess, but other than that.
Yeah, but what was Dungy's real influence on the hire? Because I'm trying to think back. Wasn't it the Fritz Pollard association or alliance that kind of helped steer the Steelers to Tomlin and kind of introduce each other at first? I don't know what Dungy's
as far as just like, 7 degrees of separation, I guess. I mean, sure. Obviously the Dungy thing. So, and I would imagine Dungy at the time probably lobbed off a phone call or something,
Yeah, I'm trying to think back.
It's hard to know for sure because obviously, the internet, 2007, where was the internet at that point? It was obviously prominent at the time, but you probably have to research more in the papers still at that time.
And then Cowher, of course, his connection was being a Pittsburgh kid from Crafton, but I don't know if there was anything beyond that. Not that that's a small thing. And then Chuck Noll, I don't think there was anything there, but you're going, way back at that point. Now, granted, the GMs have certainly had connections. Kevin Colbert, Pittsburgh kid, coached at Robert Morris. Andy Weidel, the assistant GM, Pittsburgh kid, got his start in Pittsburgh's front office in the late 90s. So there's certainly been some commonalities with the more recent GM hires. So if there's ever a change for any reason, this season or next, we'll see what Pittsburgh's approach is. But obviously the focus right now for Pittsburgh is Monday night versus Houston.
Thinking back in my head, though, at the time, obviously Mike Tomlin came out of nowhere, right? Because he was a 1-year defensive coordinator in Minnesota, and obviously before that was on the Tampa Bay staff. So, and then that kind of came out of nowhere real quick and really shocked a lot of people, and a lot of people at the time, who's Mike Tomlin? At this point. Well, I tell you who Mike Tomlin is right now. He's easily the longest tenured head coach in the NFL, and it's not even close. I think Andy Reid's second now. Obviously with the Chiefs, how many seasons has that been? Like 13 or 14? Or
I believe 2013 was his first year in KC.
All right, 12 or 13. And then behind that, I think you got 3 people at I think 9 years. And that would be what? Shanahan, McVay, and who's the other one that's got like 9 years in?
Yeah, I'm not sure on the whole list on that, but no one coming close to Tomlin, and we'll see if he gets number 20, which is still the expectation.
McDermott's been at Buffalo 9 years. So it goes Tomlin 19, Andy Reid 13, McDermott 9, McVay 9, and Shanahan 9.
And McDermott, Tomlin, college teammates. So 2 names on that list. For those who criticize Mike Tomlin for the lack of a coaching tree, that may be fair, but somebody else made this quote, I'm borrowing it. He's got a great coaching chainsaw. This is now the 9th coach to be fired right after playing the Pittsburgh Steelers during the Tomlin era. I'll read off the list here. Romeo Crennel, Eric Mangini, Pat Shurmur, Rob Chazinski, Mike Pettin.
A lot of Browns in there.
You can tell where my list started when I was researching this. I did not start outside of Cleveland. Hugh Jackson, which was a midseason firing. He was kept after that 0-16 season and then fired midway through. Brian Billick, Marvin Lewis, and of course the 9th being John Harbaugh.
Yeah, a lot of AFC North in there, and not surprising because the last game of the season is generally about against AFC North rival or team within your division there. Kind of tying this, I guess, into back to Pittsburgh and the Steelers now is the fact that if the Ravens can fire John Harbaugh, then the Steelers can fire Mike Tomlin is obviously the kind of the narrative at that point, or at this point now. And Mike Tomlin still looking for that first playoff win since 2016. And even though the game against the Ravens felt like a playoff game to close out the 2025 regular season, it was a regular season game, and it still does make you wonder. Even though I'm still pretty much convinced, and we'll never know the answer to the question, if Mike Tomlin would have lost that game, if that field goal had been good, Mike Tomlin would still be employed and moving forward, but we'll never know. And the real question now is if Mike Tomlin loses the playoff game on Monday night against the Texans, might the Steelers still decide to potentially move on from him. So but yeah, that's where we're at now at this point, and it's not even close as far as we ran down the list as far as tenured head coaches in the league. I will leave everyone with this: we are another day closer to the end of Mike Tomlin's coaching career in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I guess that is technically true. It's probably true, I guess, for any coach, but point taken.
It's easy analysis, right?
Yeah, and now half the AFC North is looking for a head coach in Cleveland and Baltimore. Zach Taylor's safe, and I guess we'll get confirmation on Tomlin's future after the fact. I don't want to spend too much time on the point because I've noted I've been a little frustrated by the national media still talking about Tomlin's future, not talking about Monday night. There'll be plenty of time to talk about Tomlin's future whenever Pittsburgh's season comes to a conclusion, but I don't really buy the idea, well, Baltimore fired Harbaugh, and so Rooney will feel more empowered or more comfortable in firing Mike Tomlin should he choose that. To me, they are independent situations, and even though Harbaugh and Tomlin are so interlinked in many ways, from the media standpoint, from a should they stay, should they go standpoint, these are all decisions that get made in a vacuum.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, each one is separate, but the only tie there is they were the two longest tenured head coaches. So people will easily point at the other side and see they did it.
Sure.
And was it the right decision for the Ravens to do this right now? Do you feel?
I was a little surprised. I thought Harbaugh was going to stay, but I'm just not as in tune with their dynamics and what's going on behind the scenes and that relationship between Harbaugh and Lamar. I know that both have kind of tamped down on some of the reporting, and I'm sure some of it's not true. I don't think Lamar was sleeping in meetings and those kinds of things. He says he sits front and center, so I believe him there. But was there some tension? It probably felt like it. And there's tension between your quarterback and your head coach, and maybe your quarterback and your OC as well, then you got to make a choice, and most teams are going to choose to stick with their quarterback, especially a two-time MVP guy like Lamar, because it's easier in a way to find a head coach than it is to find another Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I do wonder though how much after the fact now, as we get away from the Harbaugh firing, how much actual friction with Lamar Jackson's future, because they got to try to get a new contract done with him, and obviously him not practicing or sitting out of practice at least once a week the last, I don't know what, through the midway through the season up until the final week where I think he did practice all the days, but some of that stuff usually comes out after the fact. And I think some are pointing to, well, a lot of the players were asked, a lot of the veteran players were asked after the loss to the Steelers, their thoughts on moving forward, and it didn't sound, according to some of the beat writers, that there was like overwhelming support for John Harbaugh, another year of John Harbaugh. But anyway, that we're getting into Ravens Depot type stuff there, and obviously we don't follow the team as closely as we do the Steelers.
I do believe that whenever Pittsburgh is eliminated, whenever that point occurs, that you're going to hear a ton of support for Tomlin from the players, that you're going to hear a near universal line of he should be the coach, he should stay. Now, whether you agree is up to each person, but I'm pretty sure you're going to hear that public presentation from players standing right beside Mike Tomlin, even after the season wraps up.
I agree.
Dave, one more minor note here for Pittsburgh from a news standpoint. They made a practice squad move on Tuesday during one of their days off, releasing veteran offensive tackle David Sharp, who has been on the practice squad for a month or so now, is adding some offensive tackle depth after you had the injuries to Broderick Jones and Calvin Anderson, and lines got kind of thin there. So Pittsburgh now has a practice squad spot open. Should also mention DK Metcalf's suspension officially over. Pittsburgh has received a temporary roster exemption for him, so he's not officially counting against the 53-man roster at the moment, but that exemption is very temporary, a couple days. It'll be shed for him to play in Monday night's game.
Yeah, I would imagine by the time it could happen either today or by the time they practice probably on Thursday that roster exemption will end. And right now they have the open spot on the 53-man roster because they waived Trey Flowers, who cleared waivers yesterday. So the 53-man roster is 52 right now, and it will be interesting to see what the reasoning, who the next practice squad player is, and how it might be related to prepping for the Texans.
Yeah, that's a fair point. We'll see what corresponding move gets made. I don't think I mentioned that because this happened, I believe, after Monday's show. You're right. Pittsburgh did release cornerback Trey Flowers, who spent about 2 weeks with Pittsburgh, was signed on Christmas Day, appeared in one game, couple of snaps on special teams against Cleveland in Week 17, was a healthy scratch for the Week 18 finale, and so just kind of spoke to the cornerback room getting healthier with James Pierre and Brendan Eccles returning for the finale.
All right. What else
Dave,
is newsworthy here?
Yeah, one thing I want to start with, we'll, of course, go into the All22 of this game a little bit later in the show, but there's been a scoring change about the Chris Boswell missed extra point, and according to the statisticians, it was not quite missed in the sense of just a pure missed kick. According to the box score, it is now being recorded as a block by Ravens DB number 39. I think his name is Nate Jackson. And apparently the belief is he got a fingertip on the ball. I've looked at the video. It is hard to tell. Obviously, it's all pretty grainy, and you're talking about a matter of inches, but you watch his reaction after the play. It sure looks like he felt like he got a piece of that thing. So that may explain why Boswell's extra point that would have made it 27-24 sailed to the right.
All right, I've gone way down this rabbit hole too much, and I got something to add to what you just said, or maybe potentially a correction. I don't know for sure if it wasn't originally tabbed. Look, I follow the play-by-play during games, right? And on the NFL GSIS site, but which is the official, obviously, scoring site of the NFL. The fact of the matter is, I did not look at that in real time. Some people have sent screenshots of like the ESPN play-by-play, I think, from real time, just stating that it was blocked. Okay, I don't know for sure if in real time or shortly thereafter that it wasn't changed or initially stated as a block in that. Now, I went back, and obviously I've looked at it from all different angles. I've looked at the All22, the end zone, the TV version, and it's hard to definitively say. I will say this though: I looked at the head referee. If you look at the All22 wide view of that, you can see the head referee with the white cap rubbing his hands together.
As in that motion, as in it was deflected and
as
tipped?
it was tipped and deflected. Okay. All right. So there is a good chance that was initially scored block essentially, and that it just took the rest of us a few days to get around to saying, oh, that was blocked, because of getting back to the play-by-play. So once again, we're talking about something that's way down the rabbit hole here, and really, I guess, insignificant in the grand scheme of things. And I took the TV tape and I went frame by frame and I slowed it down as quick as as much as I could. It's hard to be definitive, but the player acts like he tipped. The white cap says it was tipped. So I was hoping Mike Tomlin yesterday, and I put this out on Twitter yesterday, somebody just quickly, even if it's a last quick question of the day, and that media session went like 34, 35 minutes yesterday, one of the longest ones of the year. Someone could have just asked him, what happened on that missed extra point? Was it blocked? Was it tipped or whatnot? But obviously that wasn't asked. Maybe the long snapper on his podcast, Christian Kuntz, will be asked or talk about it here in a day or so. But long story short is, I think there's a chance that was originally reported as a block and not a scoring change.
Okay, my apologies if it was not changed and if that's just how it was. And the chaos of it all, it was hard to know exactly what was noted at what point because the game was just so bonkers. Let me also clean up one other thing. It was not Nate Jackson. It was Keandre Jackson that apparently had the block. I'm thinking of the old maybe Broncos tight end for some reason. So Keandre Jackson should get credit for that. If it is blocked, do you feel better or worse about it than had Boswell just flat out missed it?
I tell you, when you go back and you look at it as many times as I looked at it, you wonder why he was able to get the pin. The real question is why was he even close to blocking that? Why did he have the quick penetration that he had?
Yeah, you watch from the left side, you have two guys there, Derek Harmon, your left wing, and Cam Hayward, kind of your left tackle, so to speak, who's been a mainstay on that unit, and there's a big gap there. And I think that Harmon slid a little too much. You have to step and punch out wide for that edge player, but you don't want to really let that inside foot move too much. You want to be firm there, and you probably need a better punch from really Harmon with the inside hand, and maybe even Hayward too, although I think Hayward has a tougher situation to deal with more the interior rush. But you got to take care of those inside guys first. You can't give that lane, and that certainly was concerning. And so, obviously, if it was a tip that deflected the path of the ball, you feel better about Boz. but I feel really bad about this operation for Pittsburgh kicking these last couple weeks. You've had bad snaps, you've had bad holds, you're allowing penetration, you're having blocks or kicks blocked. You can't have these kind of sloppy errors here in postseason football.
Yeah, and before we and we'll kind of parlay that into the way Mike Tomlin opened up his press conference on Tuesday there. But I mean, we are one Tyler Loop made field goal away from really hyper focusing on, obviously the the touchdowns, which we already did with the 3 big touchdowns, pass plays in that. But then we're hyper focusing on potentially the block extra point or tipped extra point, why, or the miss in general, why that happened, and then the kick return after that, right? Because obviously set the and then it becomes the whole special teams thing, which you said hasn't been, especially with some of the operation on the field goals and the extra points, that becomes into focus. So what a difference that, now they've moved on. We've moved on, looking ahead to the Texans and all like that. But so you could obviously point to special teams playing a role in a potential loss against the Ravens there. And, Mike Tomlin led off with that, I think, on Tuesday, right?
Yeah, he gave mixed reaction. He showed love to Corliss Waitman and special teams for the great repunt after the Ben Skoranek penalty. But even that, another issue. You got a miscommunication or ill time on the Skoranek motion versus, the ball being snapped there. You get called for illegal motion. You've had, holding call on a really good kick return by Gainwell. It was on Peppers. So got a lot of special teams issues that have to get cleaned up here because that can't be the thing that cost you in the postseason.
Yeah, he says quick assessment of our last performance, and it's rare for him to really start with special teams, like he did, and he pointed out the penalties, got to get those cleaned up, and then, he said, what did he say on as far as kick return? And look, I mean, the kick returns, even though they did have their longest of the season, right? We clarified that the other day, right?
Did they have a 37-yard return in this one? That was their long. They allowed the longest return of the season.
Oh, maybe that's where we were at. But anyway, Tomlin,
Gainwell's return would have been the longest had it stood.
That's what it was. That's what it was.
Okay, but yeah, you've taken on a lot of negativity, I think, on special teams, the operation in particular, because as Danny Smith says, a kick is not just a kick. This is not just Chris Boswell hitting off a tee. This is a snap, a hold, a protection, and a kick, and all things have to work in really good coordination, on time, on schedule, accurate perfection for these things to be successful. And Pittsburgh, I think, has fallen short far too often recently.
Yeah, look, I mean, you talk about what what pretty much everybody expects to be a very close game on Monday night against the Texans and all. Special team, a special teams play could end up being the difference maker in that one. So you definitely want to be on the right side of that. So yeah, it's just interesting that we go down the rabbit hole. We spend 15 minutes here talking about a potential blocked or tipped extra point, and we'd be even spending probably a lot more time on it by now had Tyler Loop ended up making his final field goal attempt in that game.
Sure, Chris Boswell will be getting the criticism or potentially trying to shed some of that criticism had it been blocked, and had us all realize that right after the kick occurred. And a very classy gesture, local Pittsburgh station WTAE caught this after the game. Boswell, right after the game ended, jogged up to Tyler Loop and had a couple of encouraging words that appeared for him. Kickers are a small fraternity. Boswell's had his struggles throughout his career. That one injury marred 2018 season. So very classy move there from Chris Boswell.
All right, keeping on to Chris Boswell, what did you make about Ben Roethlisberger's comments about Boswell?
Yeah, let me pull them up here. They're a little vague, obviously, so it's hard to really know exactly what this means, but Ben says, quote, this is on his podcast last night, quote, Boz is automatic, and I know he is going through some stuff right now. I talked to him after the game and just encouraged him and tried to give him some upbeat advice on just staying confident, because I know right now it can be hard and he can lose some confidence right now, but just encouraging him that at some point they're going to need him and just to keep doing his thing, end quote. I don't know if that's a reference in terms of going through some stuff of off the field type things or on the field type things. Boswell is not having his best season, not as good as last year, but I still think he's kicked pretty darn well. I think the operation has been poor and not been helpful to him. I think his 44-yarder against the Browns in Week 17 off a drop snap by holder Corliss Waitman was one of his best kicks of the year, to do that in really windy conditions. In Cleveland, of course, he had a 57-yarder to start that game against Baltimore. So, again, I don't know what Ben knows right now, but certainly a notable comment.
Right, and it's hard to speculate exactly what Ben's alluding to there on top. Is he just talking about he's going through a hard time right now because of being down about that extra point? Who knows? But I just found it interesting, and leave it to Ben to throw something at, pull the pin on the grenade, throw it out there, and then walk
Sure. Leave us to try to figure out what he means.
Walk away from it. But on to are you at all worried about Chris Boswell?
No, I'm more worried about the operation that has a lot of problems right now. I'm certainly more worried about that component of the field goal unit than I am Boss.
I agree.
But when you have a bad operation that creates some problems, it can certainly hurt the confidence of your kicker. If he's not confident in the operation, if bad operation leads to a miss, it can certainly rattle a kicker. Kicking is such a mental position, and you got to be locked in and confident. And if you're not feeling confident about the group around you, that can certainly have an effect on your kicker itself.
Agreed.
All right, Dave, let's go to Mike Tomlin, his press conference on Tuesday, and some really good news to start. He began, of course, talking about special teams, as you mentioned, but he always pretty early on starts off by talking about the health of the team, and the health of the Pittsburgh Steelers for the playoffs is very good. There were no players mentioned by name in terms of injuries. He said there were some bumps and bruises that may limit some players at the start of the week. They're going to begin practicing on Thursday. They'll do that Thursday, Friday, Saturday for the Monday game, but they're basically a clean bill of health. Everyone who was injured and came back for Week 18, like Pierre and Sayamalu and, of course, TJ Watt and Eccles, all came out no worse for wear. So Pittsburgh in a really good place health-wise for the wildcard game.
And they'll need that as well, too. And that's obviously good news. And on top of it, even though we hate that the game's Monday night, probably going to be pulling another all-nighter there. They do have the extra day of recovery within there, so that's good. It's also good that they only had how many plays did you have to chart for the defense this week? 52, 53, something like that. So that's obviously good. One comment from TJ Watt post game that really stuck in my head was him talking about how he was surprised how fresh his legs felt, and he'll obviously be now has one game underneath his belt coming off of that partially collapsed lung, and now will be a further 1 week further removed from that issue he had as well too. So we'll see how the start of the week goes. I imagine a couple of the veterans will be limited, maybe some rest in there, but this is a team that should be healthy and ready to go, and potentially barring any kind of injury during practice this week, I think we might be looking for a clean sheet for the final injury report as far as game status designations go.
Yeah, now I know that obviously tight end Darnell Washington is on IR, and people will mention that Deshaun Elliott, of course, is still out. But overall, from the guys on the 53, really healthy, and that's such a big component. No one talks about, or doesn't get talked about enough, I should say. When you talk about who makes a playoff run, goes to the Super Bowl, a lot of it's health dictated. The teams that are healthy this time of year, that have their guys and their top horses available, are often the teams that go ahead and make a run. And Pittsburgh is certainly in a good place health-wise. And, of course, getting DK Metcalf back.
Absolutely. And the only other thing I guess to watch for on Thursday is maybe some 21-day windows getting open. I think we've gone through the list, and Isaiah Loudermilk and Skylar Thompson, if any, would probably be the two potential candidates to get going. Loudermilk, I believe, had some sort of an ankle injury, and I still don't know if we really know, other than any injuries he might have suffered during getting mugged over in Ireland, what potentially the issue with Skylar Thompson could be this many weeks removed from that.
Well, it was a hamstring injury initially that put him on IR per the team. You would assume that's healed by now, even though we don't know details of said injury, but there really is not a need to get a fourth quarterback ready. You're not going to put that guy on the 53, so that's probably just, he's probably just sitting there because there's really nothing to do with that. But we'll see if anything opens up, any sort of surprising news when that aspect happens. Dave, let's go to Tomlin. And speaking of DK Metcalf, of course, he was asked about Metcalf's return and what that means to the team. And Tomlin, like his players, are excited for Metcalf to return. He says, quote, "It's certainly awesome to have DK back, but we're not going to exhale and think that DK automatically with his presence is going to be a difference or the difference. Football is the ultimate team game. It's going to require great effort from all parties involved, but certainly excited about doing it with him." So it's an obvious statement. It's great that Metcalf is back, but it's deep Metcalf alone. It's not going to be the reason why Pittsburgh beats Houston on Monday night.
Right, but it damn sure does help.
Yeah, options were yes to having DK or no. You'll take yes every time.
Yeah, look, I mean, he's obviously going to get a lot of attention from the Texans and all like that. What does that mean for people not named DK Metcalf? They obviously made it through the game against the Ravens on the winning side of the ledger without him, and I know he's got to be feeling. Whew, I'm glad that we made it through that. Now I can get back to playing football again. And he's going to be chomping at a bit to make an impact to throw his hand in the pile after his actions in Detroit, obviously, and getting suspended for the final 2 games, which a lot of it would have been easy to point to. Well, if they would have had DK Metcalf, they would have won one of those final 2 games to get into the playoffs. So at least he's not wearing the GOAT tag at this point.
A good tag to avoid. Metcalf himself spoke with the media on Monday and expressed his excitement to return and did not offer any commentary about the altercation with the Lions fan. He says he could not talk about that, probably for legal type reasons. And so just an update on Metcalf speaking for the first time since his suspension.
And look, it's much easier to answer questions that way as well too. So now he can hopefully quit being asked about it at this time. So moving forward and start focusing on the Texans.
They'll probably still ask him about it because that's a very media thing to do. But point well taken, and hopefully he can start to put that past him and just focus on football and helping Pittsburgh win. One guy helping Pittsburgh win, Dave, is Keanu Benton, and Mike Tomlin having a lot of praise. I thought he had some really kind of classic Tomlin quotes about Benton, some commentary that I haven't heard him really kind of use before. He says, quote, "I just think there's been an increase in productivity, and certainly we love activity." He says earlier there's a difference between being active and productive, but productivity trumps activity, and I think he's taken a big step this year in terms of productivity. I think it's arrow pointed up for him in just about all areas of his game. And look at the numbers, Dave. There's such a huge difference there, not just in sacks, but really across the board. I'll pull it up now. He's got 5.5 sacks this year. He had 1 in his first 2 seasons each. He's got 6 tackles for a loss this year. He had 3 in his first 2 years combined. He's got 12 quarterback hits this year. That's a season high. And so you're really kind of seeing a big spike in those splash plays.
And I think the thing that stuck out, and I praised him right out of the chute when we talked on the Monday show, because I'd already had the luxury of being up at 3:00 in the morning.
Because you did not sleep.
Right. My time and being right there when the All22 dropped. So I was able to get a more of a head start, obviously, than you. But he did jump. Not only did he jump out on the tape right from the get-go, I think my main takeaway from and look, as you pointed out, you said maybe it's not his most complete game because him and Highsmith both missing on Lamar Jackson, on that key play that ended up in a touchdown and all. Sure, I get that here, but I think after going back through the All22 multiple times at this point, the thing that really stuck out to me is just how consistent and impactful he was throughout the game. Kind of the label on Keanu going into this season and really at the start of this season is you see those flashes at the beginning of games, but as games go on, a little less impactful. I thought he was magnificent throughout this whole game here and very impactful. And I think that's one of my main takeaways. And yeah, you would have liked to see him finish or him or Highsmith finish that sack on Lamar Jackson. But just as a whole, I thought and that's why I say I still contend that, maybe this was his most complete and best game as a Pittsburgh Steeler against the Ravens. And it would be easy to put an exclamation point on that had he been the one to finish that play on Lamar Jackson that ended up in a touchdown there. But my main takeaway was not only was it a good game for Benton, is that he was really, really consistent and good throughout the game.
Yeah, that's a good point about the consistency, because you're right. He kind of comes out, hits somebody with that club over, gets an early pressure, and then sometimes in the past would go quiet the rest of the game. I mean, it was a really good game for him overall. My point about that Lamar touchdown was just, had Pittsburgh lost that game, that moment would be magnified to such a big degree, because obviously you have Lamar, and it's Alex Highsmith too, dead to rights, and that's a game-changing play, clearly. And so that just would have really stuck with you in your final game of the year. My favorite play from Benton, though, was not even one of those great plays at the line of scrimmage that he had. It was that downfield tackle on Derrick Henry that I'm pretty sure saved the touchdown, because Henry is down the left sideline. He makes Queen miss. He's got a full head of steam. He's got trailers. I don't trust Chuck Clark to cut the angle off and make an open field tackle on a full head of steam. Derrick Henry, and Benton is running his butt off to make that tackle 14 yards downfield. And you talk about Cam Hayward's effort and chase of the football. You see that on the first play of the game, running 40 yards downfield on a play he doesn't know if he can even make. You look at Hayward's career, he's been defined by that. You see that rub off on Benton, and Benton himself spoke about that to reporters on Monday. And so I look at the effort and hustle from Benton and say, man, what a great hidden moment for him on that play.
Yeah, good point there. And Mike Tomlin made it a point to talk about all the bigs up front, and I did think the defensive line really did a good job. And even Logan Lee, who had one snap in the game, made an impactful play with a pass deflection in the second half there. So, and look, Cameron Hayward, well, we're running out of ways to describe the season that he's having. And obviously the sacks aren't there, but I mean, just on a game by game, play by play basis, he continues to show up. I thought Derek Harmon had a good game in there. Otomewa, I think, had a good play, a couple of good plays in the second half, stringing out some runs and all like that. And the defensive line really has come together nicely. And as a collective unit, with the bigs up front, that might have been the best game of the year.
I think you're right. I'm trying to look up the stat right now. How many total tackles did your defensive line have in this game, Dave? Just trying to put the numbers together.
Well, we know 7 and 7 on Benton and Hayward.
Yeah, Otomewa had 1. How many did Harmon have? Harmon had 2, and these are basically almost all solo tackles too. So you're talking, what is that, 10? And then you also have the Logan Lee deflection in there. How many did Wyatt have? Did Wyatt have a tackle?
He had 1, didn't he? Or did he? Let me go back. Let me find out my place here.
I don't think he was officially credited with a tackle in this game.
Okay.
So 10, what is it? No, not 10. My math is terrible today.
Well, you had
14,
7 and 7, 14,
16, 17 tackles, which is incredible for, again, a Baltimore team that ran, 51 plays in this game. So really kind of speaks to the level of performance. And then you look at some of the pressures and impact plays and Hayward and the job that he did and all that kind of stuff. Just a quick detour, Dave. Just want to mention this because it's just coming across the wire before 11 a.m. According to Pete Thamel, Alabama quarterback Ty Simpson is turning pro. He just informed the Alabama coaches of his decision. And so that could be a potential first-round quarterback that may be more attainable than, say, Mendoza or Dante Moore for Pittsburgh this draft.
All right, I thought he would and should go back to school, but we'll see what happens there. I've charted a lot of his stuff so far this season, and we'll obviously get deeper into the tape as we get into the off season here.
You'll get to put that chart into good use because he is now headed towards the NFL draft. A really tough final game for him to go out on. Got hurt, benched in that playoff game, but it was a good season overall for Ty Simpson. Dave, Mike Tomlin has no regrets. No, what's the meme on that? No regrets.
Regrets.
Yeah, spelled incorrectly. But Tomlin says if he played Lamar again, he would have the same game plan, this aggressive plan to stop him and stop the run. It certainly meant taking on some water in the pass game, the big plays that Pittsburgh allowed. But Tomlin knew that stopping the run was the chief mission, and everything else you have to live with.
Yeah, he just basically chalked it up to that's Lamar Jackson being Lamar Jackson. He's going to make some of those plays in there, and you just try to minimize the explosiveness of it, which they obviously didn't. And what did we say? He completed 11 passes in that game, and 3 of them were home runs. And one of them obviously was caused by him escaping Benton and Highsmith there. And the follow-up, I think, too, that was something along the lines of what happened on those, we could have been better, in the back end there. Were they out of timeouts when on that last one?
Yes. So
Okay.
3rd and 1, they had no timeouts.
All right, that would have been as soon as they came out quick of the huddle on that would have probably been a perfect time to call a timeout in that situation, which obviously they did not have.
Yeah, Pittsburgh looked really confused on that play. I think the Ravens formation threw them off. They're in an unbalanced look. Ronnie Stanley standing up. It's 3rd and 1. You're worried about Derrick Henry for obvious and valid reasons. I still don't know who was in the wrong on that play because everyone felt to be in the wrong. It may have been Duggar. I don't think it's on Ramsey. Could have been Samuel for not getting enough depth. I just the play's such a mess. It's hard to ascertain, but obviously a disaster moment for the defense.
Absolutely. And yeah, three explosive play touchdowns in this, with a couple of them obviously wide open. And yeah, Lamar Jackson was Lamar Jackson on a couple of them for sure.
And not to go back to the point, but he's talking about why does Harbaugh get fired? Baltimore won that game like 3 different times. I mean, Lamar just kept bringing him down and hitting big plays. Pittsburgh was hoping to facilitate that, but you had such a great chance to win that game if you're Baltimore. Depot, sit there and say, man, you had your star quarterback go make play after play. You still couldn't win that thing. That's a gut punch, and certainly a big reason why I think this team has moved on from John Harbaugh.
All right. What else do we have from Tomlin?
Mike Tomlin's not going to unpack his bags on anyone's bed about the Steelers' playoff win drought that extends back to 2016. Tomlin asked about, does he feel the weight of that? Does the locker room sort of feel the weight of that? What is the meaning? What would it mean to break that drought with a Monday win over Houston? He says, quote, it's not about the organization or myself. It's about the collective. And quite frankly, most of these men don't care about the last whatever years that you mentioned. Most of them are new to us. And so that's where my focus is. I'm certainly not going to unpack my bags on the collective's bed, if you will. I'm excited about doing it and doing it this week with this collective. And so that's probably the right strategy. There's no, even though it's certainly relevant for us to talk about and the fan base to talk about and the media to talk about, for the team, the focus is solely on Monday night, not the past, not anything else, just beating the Texans.
Yeah, and look, a lot of these guys were not around. So
how many were around since 2016? Hayward, Boz, is that it?
We went through this the other day, didn't we? I don't think the long snapper was there.
No, Kuntz wasn't there.
Yeah, it might be Boz and Hayward, right?
Right. So a lot of these guys have not felt the weight of every single defeat.
All right. What about Mike Tomlin asked about the fast starts again?
Yeah, he gave a pretty standard answer, said he wouldn't mind a fast start, but they don't define him and the team. And that's always been his approach.
Yeah, but the thing about it is the lack of fast starts does define this team, because we're up to 6-7 on the consecutive games that this team has not scored more than 7 points in the first quarter. And slow starts obviously was a big factor, or could potentially been a big factor. And look, I understand what he's trying to say. It doesn't define as there's still 60 minutes of football. Yeah. But you don't want to put yourself in a hole like this, because this offense did not get and the defense obviously started a little sluggish, and that's been the MO for a lot of the season this year. And you down 10-0 on the scoreboard, and really the offense did not even get going until the final drive of the first half against the Ravens once again. So I understand what Mike Tomlin's saying there, but I do wish there would be a little bit more urgency, or focus on, and if we can come out and start faster in these games, it would sort of ease the tension a little bit.
Sure, and I think it's most relevant for the playoffs because I don't have the exact calculation offhand. I've noted it before. I'll note it before Monday's game, either on the Friday or Monday show, but Pittsburgh has not led after the first quarter of any of their this playoff loss streak. They've trailed, or in one case, they tied the Chiefs 0-0 after the first quarter, and then the Chiefs started to run away shortly before halftime. But you look at last year, they were down 7-0 to Baltimore. In the wild card game, they're down 14-0 to Buffalo. 2 years ago, of course, they were famously down 28-0 to Cleveland after the first quarter in that 2020 game. They were down 14-0 to Jacksonville in the 2017 wild card game. They were down, or divisional game, whatever it was. They were down with 10-0 to New England in the 2016 AFC title game. So you see the trend there of Pittsburgh being down multiple scores after just one quarter, and you just have to spend the rest of your night climbing out of that hole, and that's just not a comfortable place to be.
Yeah, and even though it wasn't a playoff game, it was the AFC North Championship game that they were down 10-0 on. So,
right.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of looking forward to see if they can get off to a little bit quicker start on both sides of the football against the Texans.
We'll have to look at what has been the first quarter score combined this year versus maybe last year or the year before, because I feel like it's been better. And that is weird to say when you talk about that stat that you cited of 67 straight games, no more than 7 points in the first quarter. But you have seen this team score more opening drive touchdowns. I think they've had more opening drive points than years past. And so in a sense, they have been better starters, just not maybe great starters.
All right, let's roll through this then real quick. If you're going to send us down the rabbit hole, this year through the first quarter, the Steelers have 67 first quarter points. Their opposition has 68. All right, so
okay,
write that down.
Writing it down. 68, 67 outscored.
All right, last season in the first quarter of the regular season, 48 points in the first quarter.
For Pittsburgh.
112 from the opposition.
Yeah, for 23?
Yes, I do. 23. 61 in the first quarter for the Steelers, 70 for the opponents.
Okay, so 2023 wasn't bad, but last year was a disaster, obviously, and that's kind of where I feel the difference. So even though Pittsburgh's offense has not been prolific, they're playing it basically even the first quarter, which I think you kind of sign up for if you're Pittsburgh.
All right. When was the last season that they won the first quarter?
2020?
Not 2022. Not 2021. Let's see. 2020. Yeah, 2020. 62-54.
Still not scoring a lot of points, really just not allowing a lot of points in the first quarter, but yeah, you're certainly looking to play no worse than even in the first quarter of this game against Houston.
Let me see if I can go back further. How many seasons prior to that? In 2017, they were 79-65. So notorious. I mean, it's obviously for me. And you go back to 2016, the last time they won a playoff game, 95-62.
In Pittsburgh's favor.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that's ideally where you'd like to be, but I think playing even football is acceptable for where Pittsburgh's been at in the past.
They're obviously a lot closer this year to the opposition in the first quarter than they were last season, as we just went over the numbers.
By a considerable margin. Anything else from Mike Tomlin during his press conference, Dave?
Oh, what else was there? What a lot of great questions were there.
Some good Jaylen Warren praise, even though he did not win MVP. It went to Kenneth Gainwell. Tomlin shouting out the job that Warren did, and just watching back through the tape, Dave, I thought Warren played a real whale of a game.
I thought he did as well, too. Both backs, I thought, played a well of a game, obviously. And I like the way Mike Tomlin answered that question and saying that, look, I understand Kenneth Gainwell got the MVP and really why he got it. And with Gainwell winning the MVP, it's no slight towards Jaylen Warren.
You got to think back to what a kind of sneaky and shrewd move it was to get Jaylen Warren paid before the season began. Because you get him locked in at a pretty friendly price, and then also you don't have both your starting running backs, because basically they're 1A and 1B, pending free agents this offseason that are kind of competing against each other. So That was an underrated move to get Warren locked up.
Yeah, it was, and a fairly decent price in retrospect.
Yep, no question. All right, that's probably it for Tomlin. Nothing else major there. So we'll move on now to the All22 review of this Steelers and Ravens Week 18 game. Let's start with the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Let's go defense this time. Dave, what stuck out to you rewatching the tape?
Just the main thing I think was the ability to get better against the run out with Derrick Henry outside of the three big plays that we mentioned. It was in real time. It didn't feel as great, especially because they started off the game with the long run that they did, and I think we had totaled it up the other day, like 70 something yards of what Derrick Henry had on the ground came on 3 carries. But after the game was over, you're able to sit back and relax and go through it all. Those were, that's pretty much all he did was on those 3 plays there overall. And fortunately, none of those ended up of him running into the end zone, which we've seen Derrick Henry do on long runs in the past, and specifically against the Steelers. And what did we say? He had 15 carries for 112 or 14 or whatever yards it was in the first half. He only had 5 for, what did we say, 14 or 18 or 16 or something like that
14.
In the second half there. So the fact that Henry only got him really 3 times on the run game, with the first one coming right off the and fortunately, that one obviously ended in them going down and driving the field and all like that. But the fact that they were able to correct and stay, gap sound pretty much overall throughout the game. We talked about how well as a collective, the defensive line played. I thought the outside linebackers did a good job in their part against the run. You didn't have a lot of egregious missed tackles overall when it came to Derrick Henry. And what you ended up doing is you ended up putting the ball in Lamar Jackson's hands in the second half and forcing him to beat you, which he nearly did in that aspect of it. So it all started, I think, with the adjustments in the second half and not letting Derrick Henry kill you. And then, as we've talked, even though Lamar Jackson got loose for a couple times in this game, what the other guys did when that ball was in their hands, not named Derrick Henry, they didn't let that get out of hand against him.
I don't mean to make you do some more research, and I'm looking it up myself, but just as we talk, kind of these thoughts float around in my head. But how many carries did Derrick Henry have in the fourth quarter of this game? I know obviously late in the game script required Baltimore to throw, but I believe you're right. Just 1 carry for 2 yards early in the fourth quarter. And you talk about the war of attrition. We talk about how good Derrick Henry is in the fourth quarter. He's got like the 3rd most rushing yards, I think, ever in the fourth quarter. The way that he's able to wear teams down and gig them in the fourth quarter. Did that to Green Bay the week before. That final toss, that 4th touchdown, that Green Bay was clearly waving the white flag there. And for Henry to have just 1 fourth quarter carry is a major win. Now, obviously, he gave up a lot of that through the air, and so Baltimore still scored, but just kind of from a game plan standpoint, Henry didn't beat you in some of the ways he's beaten Pittsburgh and beaten teams in the past. The D-line did a great job making sure that Henry couldn't get a full head of steam, kind of making this guy change directions, have a lot of backfield traffic to have to navigate, and that was really important. But my negative takeaways, I mentioned, is kind of the same. It's just the safety play was not good enough. Even on the Henry 41-yarder, we don't talk about it much. Kyle Duggar missed an open field tackle on Henry that kind of set him loose. I know it's tough to tackle Derrick Henry in the open field. You don't want to be in that position too often, but you're the safety. You got to go make that tackle, and Duggar didn't, and Henry caught the edge. And so you talk about all the big plays the safeties have allowed the last 2 weeks. I kind of rattled through them. I'll probably do a video on that either for tomorrow or later in the week. That's got to get cleaned up.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said right out of shoot, watching the tape ahead of you on Monday's show, Kyle Duggar did not have a great game at all. You go further into the tape, and Jalen Ramsey wasn't one of obviously his better games at completion to Isaiah Likely late in the game. That to me, that shouldn't have happened, especially when you got a player. And going back to kind of the things that you mixed in. Yeah, this is really the first real season. Ramsey has played, as a safety, and he's had to mix in going back down in the slot and all recently as well too. But at this point, at the 17th last regular season game of this, obviously of the year and all, you would expect it, especially as long as Duggar and Ramsey and those other guys have played together at this point, you would have expected a better game from your safety unit, especially being as how the front had done their job mostly against the run.
Yeah, no question. So I want to see that get cleaned up. I do like Pittsburgh. I think that their blitzes and their blitz package continues to be really strong. They've had some really good calls on the Herbig sack. They called this twice. It was the Herbig sack and the Herbig pressure. That one where that 3rd and 7 where Lamar threw it out of bounds after kind of being wrestled by Herbig, the play before the likely catch. It was the same call where you're going to blitz. You have your 3 outside backer package on the field of Watt and Highsmith and Herbig off ball. You're going to blitz both off-ball linebackers, so Queen and Herbig. You're going to drop out both edge guys of Watt and Highsmith, and you had success on both those plays. One was Herbig, beat the back for a sack. The other one, he dipped the center and got the pressure on Lamar. So you've had some really strong correlation between blitzing and pressure rate these last 2 games, and that'll be needed to continue for Monday.
Yeah. What if you got your charting pulled up there? How many times did they have Watt, Herbig, and Highsmith all on the field at the same time during those final 2 Ravens possessions?
It wasn't often. It wasn't a lot, but it was effective when it was. Let me just pull up my chart.
Why wouldn't have you had where I'm going with this is why couldn't it have been more times?
Well, I mean, a couple factors. A, the Ravens didn't run a lot of plays, so that's kind of just one component.
But I'm talking about
it.
The final 2 possessions. Why couldn't those 2 have been on the field more, or those 3 been on the field more?
And it looks like I just lost the wrong button there. 3 snaps of all 3 being on the field. I'd have to think back. I mean, when Baltimore took over on that final drive right around midfield, they have all 3 timeouts. They can still run the ball, obviously, and so you can't play your pass rush package, which is what your 3 outside linebacker package is, because it has just often 1, or sometimes I think they had 2 defensive linemen for this game. So I understand that component of it. I think there was still a threat that Baltimore could run the ball, given they had all their timeouts until the end, basically, and so that is probably a big reason why Pittsburgh did not utilize this package. They played their big people almost the entire game. They had 3 defensive linemen on the field for 81% of the snaps. Some of that is personnel response because Baltimore plays big people too, but even against 11 personnel, Pittsburgh would be in their 3-3-5 with just 1 inside backer, Queen, on the field, so they could have 3 D linemen and have 5 DBs in the field to account for the pass. And so this was a game that had to be a big people game to stop Henry and stop the run. I think that's why you saw very little of that 3 outside linebacker package.
All right, so and obviously the story of the game had Luke made the field goal, or not story of the game, but a lot of focus would be on the 3 big plays that they gave up in the passing game.
Do you still feel the same about the egregiousness level of the 3 that we talked about Monday as you do now after watching All22?
Yeah, because I feel like I got a little confirmation bias from Tom.
How so?
Well, him talking about Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson escaping Benton and Highsmith is Lamar Jackson doing Lamar Jackson things.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you chalk it up to. But what are they saying behind the scenes?
Yeah,
you got to make that play. You got 2 guys there. It's not even just like a solo one-on-one thing. You got 2 guys ready to sandwich this guy. I mean, yeah, it's Lamar. It's a Lamar type play, but your whole goal was to not let Lamar make Lamar type plays.
right. But I still feel the same as far as egregiousness goes, and it would have. The last one is obviously could have been the most impactful too, right? When they come out, it would have been very nice to have a timeout in that situation and sort through that. When they came out of the huddle the way that they did, going fast and looking a little bit confused, that would have been a prime moment to have one of those timeouts left.
Sure, no doubt about that. And Tomlin did confirm in the press conference there was a coach-to-player communication issue, which was pretty clear and pretty bizarre for both helmets to have some sort of issues with the communication. there. Anything else here
You
defensively?
haven't changed your mind as far as the ranking of egregiousness?
Nope.
Okay.
What did I have? What did I have? The Flowers first touchdown being the most egregious, and then followed by the 3rd and 1, and then I think the 4th down play is the least egregious. I'll stick with that order.
All right.
Any other thoughts on the All-22, Dave? Defensively?
On defense, no. I mean, it was good to see him only have to be on the field 50-something snaps, but a lot of that was a big play. I thought this is one of those, other than that, how did you enjoy the play, Mrs. Lincoln? They did good yards after the catch, other than the big plays that they hit them. And obviously those guys were running with not being contested after the 3 touchdowns, so.
The tackling was good.
Mhm.
It just, the big plays required no need for broken tackles or
Right.
anything like that because they were all walking touchdowns. I thought one point we should mention that Tomlin had talked about too, and I always maybe do a poor job thinking about it or feeling it because it is intangible, but the physicality of the game moved in Pittsburgh's favor throughout that game. In the second half in particular, I thought Pittsburgh's defense was much more physical than Baltimore's offense, where it was kind of maybe even in the first half. You really saw Pittsburgh, I think, as the game wore on, Pittsburgh become the more physical unit, and that's a big reason for the victory.
All right.
Offensively, Dave, your thoughts on the All-22?
Offensively, obviously didn't do much until the offense didn't really get going until the last possession of the second half. I thought throughout the game, they made it a point to try to attack the perimeters. The toss game came alive, starting on that last drive of the first half. That, along with the quick game out to the edge in using Gainwell and Scantling was basically an extension of the run game. I thought they leaned into more of that as the game went on. I thought a couple of key catches that Austin had came on the slant flat dragon concept that we talked about on Monday there. The throw to Adam Thielen was just a magnificent throw and catch by Thielen. I think that might have came against Humphrey, if I'm
It
not.
was. He tweeted about that. He said he
right.
thought it was incomplete, and then he
Right.
just looked up and just saw that Thielen somehow had the football. Was that Rodgers' best throw of the season? I know it's recency bias. That might have been, though.
Yeah, recency bias. I think that potentially was. And then another key play was obviously the hitting of Pat Freiermuth down the middle against cover 2 type situation. What a great Pat Freiermuth has become a better route runner. Plain and simple. At least in some instances there, and that was a great route by him. And Aaron Rodgers talked after the game about how they working, hoping to hit something like that, dating all the way back to training camp and all like that. So Aaron put it on him on that great route by Freiermuth on that one. We talked about the route that Calvin Austin ran on his touchdown that caused the DB to slip. That was a key component of the game there. One play that I think kind of gets overlooked was the Jaylen Warren, even though it ended up in no points, right? The screen out to the or the late check down to Jaylen Warren out to the side. He beat a defender to get the ball down deeper down in the red zone. Thought it was a good play on him. On that very play, Dylan, I think we talked about this the other day, the trap by Dylan Cook. The offensive line, I thought as a whole,
good. Good.
was really, really good overall. I thought Aaron Rodgers was able to hold the football a little bit longer in this game. The unfortunate aspect, I think, on this is as a whole, there wasn't much down the field, action other than the Freiermuth and the Calvin Austin play. Didn't feel like there was even really a lot of chances to connect on that. And I guess the other thing, and I went back through the All-22 this morning, the ending possession of the first half when they were down red, right immediately in the red zone. They went out to the left. I think it was Metcalf. So they got, not Metcalf. Oh, I'm drawing a
I'm
blank.
not sure. Give me some context here.
Gainwell,
Okay.
the play over out to the left to Gainwell and got a couple of yards that way, and then that got him a little bit down deeper into the red zone there. And I suppose it was a case of not having timeouts left at that time, but not a lot of creativity on the passing plays that happened after that. You know, a lot of I think two of them were four verts.
But what
And
can you call there? Because the
yeah,
Ravens have all three DBs on the goal line. There's
right.
there's
That's what
nothing
I'm
you can
getting
do.
to, and you can't throw short of the goal line,
Right.
you know, in that situation there. So I understand that, but there really wasn't. There was nobody getting separation. You're beating your head up against the wall, and thank goodness there was a pass interference play in the end zone, which gave you. And look,
Well,
what
maybe
do
not,
you
thank goodness, because it cost you 3 points. But
right?
point taken. Point taken.
But well, my when looking at a Baltimore side of the ledger there, it was really smart on them because you don't want to. What would you rather have? One more crack of stopping the Steelers at the one, or give up a touchdown in that situation? You got to
Oh,
interfere
sure.
with the player in that situation. So that ended up being a good penalty in hindsight on them. And then obviously, you know, it comes down to the play selection and execution of that final play there before the first half ended, and coming away with with no points, you know, had me down in the dumps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think everyone was pretty crestfallen by that missed moment there. Couple things to go to what you talked about. I thought Pittsburgh pushed the ball downfield a fair amount in this game. There was the really deep shot to Calvin Austin, 1-on-1 that was incomplete. You, of course, had which was
Yeah,
a
but
really good
how
call.
much chance did Calvin Austin have on that one down the right side,
Well,
though? You know,
not much, but I'm just saying in the sense of, did they push the ball down the field? Did they try to take some aggressive shots? They did. Of course, you had the miss to Jonnu Smith, which was a great play call because Pittsburgh had set that up. It was a constraint play. They'd run the same look with Hayward in the backfield, kind of running counter or a little wind-back play. They ran it the first time. They play action off of it the second time. Yankee concept, Johnny Smith wide open. I think I put that on Rodgers. I think he just missed it. You had a similar throw to MVS in the second half that was incomplete. Of course, you had the deep ball to Thielen, deep ball to Freiermuth, deep ball to Calvin for the touchdown. I thought you had some deep shots in this game. And as you talked about Monday's show, certainly once Kyle Hamilton exited, it felt like the pass game opened up.
right.
The Ravens became more limited in coverage. They lost one of their top guys out there, and that certainly was a big factor in this one. It's funny, we talk about Freiermuth being the zone killer, and his biggest catch of the season was against Washington on that little why nod. That's just kind of a funny thing there. One other point to make, and I'm going to tweet this out here. I was watching through the tape more last night. Do you have the tape pulled up, the full reel, all 22, Dave?
See what my last one is. Yeah, I've got it. You got a
Go
timestamp?
go to 37 minutes on that. In a sense, I think a mistake by Calvin Austin in the first half might have won Pittsburgh the game. You look at that situation, they're at the 25, 3-by-1, I think it was, or empty. Austin's backside X receiver. He runs a hitch. Rodgers wants him on the out to get out of bounds, and he doesn't do it. He misses him, but that's the same formation, not the same play, but it's the same formation as Austin on that hitch and go on the touchdown. And it's against Awuzie, too. It's the same corner on both plays. And so I think Awuzie thought that Austin was going to run the hitch the second time. It's why he kind of bit on it, because he just saw it earlier in the game, which was from the 30-yard line. It was the same position. And that, I think, is actually kind of what helped Austin get open on his game-winning touchdown.
Yeah. What was the distance going the other way on the touchdown? 28 or?
It was 3rd and 10. I think it was 28 yards. It was very similar to the line of scrimmage. Now, the down was different. This was
Right.
Austin's touchdown was 3rd down. This miss, I think, was maybe even 1st down. But it's very similar on the backside of that in a lot of ways. And again, Austin's running the incorrect route, and Rodgers was kind of mad about that after the play in the first half. But I think in a sense that actually helped create the touchdown on the back end of this thing.
All right, let me see. You got 3-by-1. You got sidecar of Gainwell there. Now let me fast forward to the.
Yeah, go to the touchdown, which is like 117, I think, for those playing the home version of the Terrible Podcast game if you're watching the All22. Now, again, the play call is different. They're tagging it backside. That's pretty common through everyone. You might tag some route backside. The front side is a different play. But just looking, we're in the mind of Awuzie, the cornerback.
Right.
I'm getting the same look here.
It's still, well, they motion. The only difference is Yeah, they get to the same pre-snap. It's a 3-by-1 with Gainwell's sidecar. Yeah, it's a good point by you. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're exactly right. So
So
that miss maybe did potentially set up, and that also ran from the 26-yard line.
yeah, same position essentially.
Right.
So I think that was in Awuze's mind. Of course, he slipped, so I understand there's that element too. If he didn't slip, does he defend that better? Probably. It's not as wide open, but I think he kind of because why would a corner bite on a little hitch on 3rd and 10
'Cause he's seen it
when
before, right?
because he saw it before? Yeah, because otherwise you would just say take the hitch, I'll tackle you, we'll get the 4th down and go win the season. So I think, funny enough, I think Austin's mistake in the first half created his glory in the second half.
Alright, good on you. Good observation there.
But you're right, the offensive line was just fantastic. I know Baltimore's defensive line, the pass rush is not what they're going to face on Monday against Houston, but I thought the line was great. I thought Frazier had key blocks. I thought Tanu, man, that snatch and trap, man, he's so good at it. I'm going to put a reel together once the season ends of him doing it all year long. The block that he had on Trent Simpson on the Gainwell touchdown, also McCormick and Frazier, key blocks on that play. Thought Dylan Cook did a great job sealing the edge in this game. I just could not say enough about how good this offensive line was.
Absolutely, they were good. As a collective, really good.
And then Rogers late, was really good. I mean, another factor too to consider, and it's actually kind of funny. It's not often this happens, but watching the Tomlin press conference, the YouTube channel, they'll kind of put some clips up from the game. Sometimes it's just some color. The number of plays the running backs made in space post catch was huge. Warren, Gainwell. I mean, how many 3rd down conversions did they have in this game? I think at least maybe 3 or so. Warren breaking tackles. He broke 3 tackles on one long escort swing. Gainwell, it was a 3rd and 5 that he converted. I think he had a 3rd down conversion later in the game. I thought the backs really made some big plays in space in the past game.
And Mike Tomlin spoke to that yesterday as well, too, about the ability to catch and run.
Right. And I know that's been happening all year, so it's not new or earth-shattering news, but it certainly was valuable, especially as the offense kind of started to come alive. They needed some plays like that to get going, and I thought those guys provided that. I thought Warren played a really good game. Man, him against Roquan Smith, he blew him up in pass protection on one play. He broke a tackle on him on another. There was that, 20-something yard run that Warren had down the right sideline, broke 5 tackles on that play, including running through Roquan Smith, who's a big dude, a great player. I mean, that's just, it's typical Jaylen Warren stuff, I know, but it's still to be commended.
And then as I talked about that, even though it did on the play deep down where they checked down over to Warren out to the right side there, he juked out Marlon Humphrey. It wasn't a great game for Marlon Humphrey, was it?
I thought he had some plays early on, but I think it certainly got a lot worse as the game went on, and it's probably a pretty sour note for a sour season for Humphrey to go out on.
All right.
Tommy Rees, the Browns OC, is interviewing for the Browns head coaching job. So just some news coming across there. We'll see what the Browns do with their hiring process. To go back to Pittsburgh, that's kind of the bulk of my thoughts here, Dave, but anything else?
No, I think we hit on it pretty good there, and we've already pretty much addressed the special teams aspect earlier in the show.
Yeah, there's some crazy moments in that special teams, though. It was obviously, Captain Obvious statement, not a good day for Tyler Loop. Go watch on the kickoff, the kick return, in which Peppers was called for the hold, which was bad, obviously. But at the end of that play, he blows up Tyler Loop, just hits him and just rocks his world. And so Loop had the kickoff out of bounds, the missed kick, obviously, and Peppers just destroyed him on that play. There's a lot of fun Easter eggs on the special teams tape in this game, Dave.
All right, I'll have to spend some time with this extra day to go through that a little bit. See if I imagine you'll put that up on the Twitter machine here.
Yeah, I'm going to. It's on my to-do list. All right, Dave, any other final thoughts?
No, I think we're all caught up there and starting to pull some Texans tape now. And I think they play a lot of zone. I thought it was interesting. Mike Tomlin's comments on that. A lot of praise. They were a kick butt unit all the way across. Mike Tomlin said when it comes to the Texans defense, and they're boistered by the edge rushers, obviously. But I mean, they do a really good job of rushing coverage going hand in hand. They play a lot of zone, and they can do that because of the kind of pressure that they get from their outside guys. So just kind of thinking ahead here, a couple of your zone beaters in Pat Freiermuth or not zone, guys that excel against the zone in Pat Freiermuth and Adam Thielen could come into play in this game. With DK Metcalf coming back, how does that change? Who who sees the biggest decline in snaps? MVS?
Yeah, I think because MVS is kind of, in theory, supposed to be your height, weight, speed, vertical stretcher. I think there's a lot of trust in Thielen as a blocker over the middle, running a lot of digs. So, in a sense, all those guys will kind of have some reduction in snap count, clearly. Calvin, Thielen, MVS, Scotty, but I think MVS may take the biggest hit.
All right, no way Roman Wilson gets a helmet in this wild card game, right?
No, not going to happen.
All right.
And I assume Caleb Johnson will continue to be inactive.
Yeah, and I imagine Driscoll will be inactive, Howard, and
be the same as last week, really. I mean, besides Trey Flowers, who's been released, I guess will be one new inactive.
What about Deshaun Jameson as a future gunner?
Yeah, he had some good reps. You had that clip of him splitting that double team. He's got some speed. So, I assume he'll probably be elevated again for this game. Now, he didn't start at gunner. They've been rotating gunners this year. I think it was Eccles and Skoranek. But as the game kind of goes on, you don't want Eccles to take every single rep because then they have to be a gunner and then go play defense. You're gonna play more 11 personnel, more sub in this game. So you probably don't want Eccles taking all those snaps, running down punts, especially when you get into situations where it's back to back. Where you definitely don't want guys having to run down twice and then go play defense. So yeah, I mean, and you have, as you made an important note, there are unlimited. How do I want to phrase this? I want to phrase this correctly. Players do not have a cap on how many times they can be elevated in the postseason. You still can't elevate more than 2 in a game as a team, but the elevation counter all resets.
Resets, yeah. On the other one that Jameson was on the gunner on, that was the one that he's getting downfield and he causes the two Ravens guys to collide and that the Ravens were lucky that football did not hit one of those two players down there.
Yeah, it very well could have, and kudos to Jack Sawyer for jumping on that football just in case. But yeah, I think Jameson's done well, and so that was your 4th string nickel corner in training camp. No one talked about, but you never know who's going to step up and help aid you to a victory.
All right, shall we get to your voice is doing real well? I don't think we should push it here. Should we get to some emails here and close it out?
Yeah, I want to get the emails and close out today's show. Just real quick, the All-Pro team will be announced Friday. I don't know if it'll be before or after our Friday podcast. What are your just quick thoughts, expectations? Who's worthy? Who makes the first or second All-Pro teams, Dave, for Pittsburgh?
Man, I think you got to look hard and long about Cam Hayward getting another first team.
Who were the AFC Pro Bowlers ahead of him for the defensive line? Simmons was one.
Oh, I don't have that pulled up. You'll have to tell me.
I'm going to try to look because it's a deep defensive line group. Not to say that Hayward is not worthy. He's certainly worthy of All Pro, and I really hope that he gets it. How ESPN's doing it by position? Who does? Let's not do that. Trying to see who the D tackles were. God, can there just be a good Pro Bowl layout where it's not like tiles? Just give me a list of names would be really, really helpful right now. But
I don't have it pulled up.
Hayward it was Chris Jones, Jeffrey Simmons, and Zach Allen. And can Hayward crack that group is the question. Simmons is going to make it. Chris Jones has the name recognition. I don't know if he's quite as worthy as other years. Zach Allen's a really good player. I think he's the most underrated player in football, even though he's getting some of that recognition now. So Hayward is certainly worthy, but when you have 3.5 sacks, I think voters look at that and they don't respect it as much, even though certainly Hayward's impact goes far beyond just sack numbers.
Man, did he lead all defensive linemen in passes defensed? Hayward.
How many did Hayward have?
It was like 6 or 7, wasn't it?
I can check. Zach Allen had 6.
Passes defensed. 6 for Cameron Hayward.
All right, so he tied at least Zach Allen, but he led. Hayward did all interior defensive linemen across both conferences in tackles, total tackles, and snap count, which was obviously huge. So, yeah,
will Zach Frazier get votes? I'm not expecting him to get first team All Pro, but will Zach Frazier get votes?
He'll get probably some votes. Question is, can he get second team? You got Humphrey, Linderbaum, even though I don't think Linderbaum is completely worthy of it. Aaron Brewer in Miami will be names to watch. Can Frazier crack that group? I think he probably falls short. I really want to go back to Hayward, though, because you also have the NFC of Jalen Carter, Leonard Williams, and Quinnen Williams from straight over from the Jets to Dallas. I think Hayward can probably beat that group out. The question just might be the AFC guys he's fighting.
Will TJ Watt get at least a second team, or is he deserving of at least second team?
I wouldn't say he's deserving, not to disrespect him. It's just you had 7 sacks, you missed time with injury. It wasn't a Watt type of year. Will he get it? He got a Pro Bowl vote. I know fan vote certainly has a nod in that, but Watt's name value still carries a lot of recognition. He won't be first team. Obviously Myles Garrett, all that will be first teamers. Could he get second team? He could. Will he truly deserve it? Probably not. What about Jalen Ramsey? He was a Pro Bowler.
I don't think he will or should, but that's me. What about, will Joey Porter Jr. get any votes?
No, it's just too many good corners out there. Is Porter at that level? He's probably right close to it. But when you only have 1 interception, again, you got to get to mind the voters. The stats may not really be there, and you got Stingley and Surtain and Christian Gonzalez, and who's in the NFC. I'm looking at the names. J.C. Horn, great year for him. Mitchell, DeJean. I don't think Porter's going to get first or second team. Kicker, probably not. Boz, probably not there.
I think that's the list, really, pretty much, of guys that'll get votes.
Well, there's one more name to consider, Dave. Ben Skoranek for special teams.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm hoping 21 tackles he finished with on the year. You'll have to do the research to see if that's a Steelers record. I know we were talking about that a week or two ago, and in recent history that was the top mark. But I'm hoping and expecting and thinking that Ben Skoranek will make All-Pro.
All right, so the most likely first-team All-Pros for the Steelers on Friday are Cameron Hayward and Ben Skoranek.
Yes, I think Skoranek will get first team. I'm hoping Hayward can at least get second team. I certainly has my vote for first team, even though there's a ton of good defensive linemen in football. Hayward will be a really interesting name to watch.
All right,
Dave, let's get to some emails and close out today's show.
All right, shame on me for getting Skoranek. Let's go with Todd Jitzler. At some point, I realize it now may not be the time, but could you review the final stats that you guys projected at the beginning of the season? Catches, carries, yards, and touchdowns. It would be nice to see where the ending number is lined up from Todd. Maybe David O can climb down that rabbit hole of going back to listen to some of our final stat predictions ahead of the regular season.
For Rodgers, this is my post that I do before each season. I projected 3,700 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. What did he finish with? That was pretty good guess. There was also under the assumption he was not going to miss a game, and he did, of course, miss the Bears game week 12. He finished with 3,300 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. So I think I'm pretty good there.
And I think I had I think I was more accurate potentially on the Aaron Rodgers numbers. I won't get you into the DK Metcalf conversation.
Oh, listen, there's an asterisk there. There's a clear asterisk.
I'm willing to bet I fared better than you did across the board.
I think I got the Rodgers numbers. What did you guess on Rodgers? Do you remember?
I thought I was around 3,100, 3,200.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you don't ever know how many. If he would have played in that Bears game, he would have been 3,500. If we're going to use a DK argument over here, I mean, I guessed 24 touchdowns, 9 picks. He threw 24 touchdowns and 7 picks.
I don't know. I don't have a memory of that. Once again, Todd, maybe David O will take some time after the season, go back and listen to a couple of those final podcasts there, specifically maybe the one where I have Ross and then Alex to follow up on that. Should probably be pretty easy to find, and we'll get out some checker flags. Or I tell you where I was way wrong. I'm not afraid to admit this was Kenneth Gainwell.
Sure. Both were. I think we both had an inkling he was going to be pretty involved in the passing game, but who could have predicted leading the team in receptions. That would have
Yeah,
been.
well, you were a lot more right on both carries and catches than I was when it came to Gainwell.
Well,
I'll give you that one.
I'm looking at my Caleb Johnson projection, which I wrote about right after. I felt like I was over my skis on that one. I had 167 carries for 773 yards and 6 touchdowns. Came a little bit short on that. I did save face on Jaylen Warren. I projected 218 carries for 972 yards and 7 touchdowns. He finished with 211 carries for 958 yards and 6 touchdowns. So that was pretty good. What else did I get wrong? I had TJ Watt at 17 and a half sacks. So if I took a 1 off of that, I'd feel closer to my prediction. So that was not great.
All right, Brett Niles in here wants to know what do we think the firings of Harbaugh and Stefanski's are good decisions, or are they GMs tossing the coach overboard to save their own jobs? What are the odds of both Stefanski and Harbaugh ending up head coaching jobs this season, or are they two of the best available candidates this year? And what are the odds the Browns hire Harbaugh? He asked. Last question for at least the last decade. Announcers have talked about Harbaugh and Tomlin being the 2 longest tenured coaches. With Harbaugh gone, who's in second place? I think we answered all that, Brett. That final question at the top of the podcast there.
Yeah, Andy Reid.
Andy Reid, and then you got 3 at 9. I think are the next ones there. I think there's a very good chance both Stefanski and Harbaugh end up getting head coach jobs this offseason. Are they the two best available candidates? Harbaugh obviously is one of them. I don't know if Stefanski is one of the top 2 best candidates. He'd probably land a job somewhere, though. And do we think the firings of Harbaugh and Stefanski are good decisions? Look, Stefanski was sort of hamstrung on the offensive with the quarterback situation and all. The defense was out of this world, and obviously that goes to
It's a Jim Schwartz thing.
Jim Schwartz thing over there. So I think Stefanski's did well with what he was given over there. Now, does that mean it was a good decision or not? I mean, Harbaugh, as we talked about, I was shocked that they moved on from him now. Anything else to add to all that?
I think both will be head coaches in 26. I think they're 2 of the stronger candidates. Harbaugh is obviously the best candidate, and A, it's a weak cycle, and then B, I think in most cycles he would have been the best candidate still. I think Stefanski's got enough looks. He's got the combination of offensive reputation with experience that teams I think will like. Teams looking for a guy with experience, like a Tennessee, for example. They probably want somebody who's been there, done that, as opposed to first-time head coach like Brian Callahan, who was a mess, but they probably still want an offensive-minded coach. I just had a thought, and I just completely spaced out on it, but I think both those guys will become head coaches. I was reading our buddy Scott Petrak yesterday. He believes the odds-on favorite for the Browns job is Jim Schwartz. So interesting note there, be a promotion from DC to head coach. Of course, Schwartz, a former head coach himself. Should also note when it comes to longest tenured head coaches, this gets a little bit into the semantics. Andy Reid has been a head coach for an NFL team since 1999. Now, his stint with Kansas City began in 2013, and so that's where Tomlin has the tenure. But technically, just as a head coach for any team without any sort of breaks, Andy Reid has the longest tenure in the NFL.
All right. Robbie Dugan writes in, the Texans starting pass rushers have 27 sacks combined. How has Rodgers fared against the Blitz this year? Is this potentially a positive for the Steelers in this game? Rob, I just started getting into previewing the Texans and all, done some preliminary work on that. I will tell you this, they're not a heavy blitzing team, nor do they have to be. They let their front four be their front four, and I think that's one thing that Mike Tomlin highlighted during his press conference on Tuesday, that they really don't they're not super reliant on the blitz overall there. And because of the way Aaron Rodgers gets the ball out so quickly, I don't think you're going to see a lot of blitzing from them in this game overall, nor do I think they should, the way their front four gets the job done there. So the title of this is Blitzing Texans, is the title of the email here. I don't think that's going to be a component of this game. I think it's going to be a component of how the Steelers fare of getting the ball out and not letting those two edge rushers be game wreckers, overall, and then how Aaron Rodgers can do at deciphering the defense, which is mostly a zone-based defense, and go from there. I think that, and can the Steelers run on them?
Yeah, I think you're right. Houston, according to PFR, has blitzed only 18.9% of the time this year. That's the fifth lowest rate of any NFL team. So I don't think that Tiger's going to change its stripes. I saw a post, I forget who it was, and I just scrolling through Twitter this morning, that the Texans basically have the most static kind of old school defense. So they don't do a lot of coverage rotations. They don't do a lot of exotic blitz looks. They just kind of line up and kick your butt, which kind of speaks to the talent level that they've assembled over there in Houston. So yeah, it's not exactly a really exotic defense. It's just a really good defense with a lot of talent.
Butt kickers, or right? That's
what Tomlin said. Yeah,
they line them up and say, "Beat us." That's
there's no
basically
secrets.
what they do.
They say we're better than you, and they have proven they are better than anyone else.
All right. We'll end with this one from Paul Lutz. Draft needs. Hello, gentlemen. Great job as always. I know we still have the playoffs to get through, but I'm wondering what you think the team's draft needs will be. Obviously, quarterback is number one, but after that, where would you go? I think there's a case to be made for a few positions, including wide receiver, middle linebacker, safety, and defensive end to replace Cameron Hayward when he retires. What are your thoughts? Thank you. And as always, keep up the great work. Paul, we're going to obviously have I understand these kind of questions and all, but here, man, we should be celebrating this team in the playoffs, looking forward to their first playoff win since 2016. But I'll indulge you a little bit here, because I was thinking about because we had Trinidad, what's his last name?
Chambliss
is going back to school. We just got the word this morning, obviously, that Ty Simpson's coming out. And then this is what, now people will circle back and say, remember when Dave said this?
Yeah, be careful, Dave.
Yeah. I'm not so convinced the Steelers are going to be headstrong for a first-round quarterback.
Ooh, why is that?
I just think because of the class where they potentially will draft, because thinking, does Tomlin this late in his career want to have to go through developing even, let's say, a blue chip top three of the class type quarterback? I'm not, and it's still early in the process here. I really think, and I was looking at this the other day, and make a note of this only if I'm right.
Okay.
Could they potentially trade up? Where are the Dallas Cowboys picking? 10th or something? Where's
another trade with Dallas?
Where is the draft order at? Where do we go to?
Tankathon?
Yeah, Tankathon. Real quick here. Let me look. I was looking at this. 12th. Dallas picks 12th overall. That's one potential spot to go up and maybe get a top wide receiver. And potentially number 7 with Washington. Where I'm at right now, am thinking that this team's going to A, trade up in the first round, and B, do so for a wide receiver. That's where I'm at right now. And I have 12 and 7, 12, 8, and 7 as potential spots.
Who's 8?
8 is New Orleans.
Okay. Any reason why? I can see Dallas because they have receivers, assuming they re-sign or tag George Pickens, but why Washington and New Orleans as spots?
Just because they lack it feels like they need a lot of draft picks, and both of them have their quarterbacks, and I could see them compiling maybe and getting more picks. Maybe.
What was the phrase you used? They won't be headstrong for a quarterback. What do you mean by that?
I don't think that's going to be. I don't think they're, unless they could obviously go up and get one of the top 2 or something. I mean, beyond that, how confident are you in this class past Mendoza and the Oregon kid?
Well, I've not watched the class really at all in a draft evaluation lens to make a judgment. Obviously, Simpson being added feels like a guy that'll be very much in the mix. I mean, I'll disagree if you're taking it from the standpoint of they're not going to be looking really hard at any of those potential options, the way that they looked at Shedeur Sanders and Jackson Dart and Tyler Shuck, bringing those guys in for visits, going to the pro days. I fully expect Tomlin and the Steelers to have that same posture for any potential mid-first rounder, early day 2 candidate. I think you have to. How do you not? If you bring back Aaron Rodgers and there is no franchise quarterback of the future. Now, will they draft one? Who knows? Of course, they pass on that this year, but they're going to be looking at all those guys very strongly to evaluate and have a good, confident feeling. It's important to note
I think they like Will Howard more than everybody else outside of the organization likes Will Howard.
I'm sure they like Will Howard a lot, but enough to not draft a quarterback in the first round, or at least not explore it, at least not look at these guys.
Now, look, if it was up to me, I'd go up and get Mendoza.
I think the Raiders will disagree. Not let you get Mendoza.
Right. And then the Oregon kid as well too. But outside of that, I'm kind of cooled off on the rest of this class.
Yeah, it's not a great class. There's no denying that. And Pittsburgh may have the same calculation as last year and say there's just not a guy worth taking, and so we're just going to go somewhere else. We're not going to reach the way that we reached in 2023 in a down class because we had to put square peg in round hole and get a quarterback so we could say we had a quarterback, and that was a disaster. It's important to note on Chambliss, while he's intended to go back to Ole Miss, that is not a guarantee. He has a waiver that he's applied for from the NCAA, a medical hardship.
Six year or something, right?
Yeah, because he had tonsillitis at Ferris State, and he wants to try to say that should give him an extra year because he lost a year basically because of that. The NCAA, in their infinite wisdom, who knows what they'll do there? They could deny that. This thing go to court. I have no idea. And then, of course, Chambliss himself, what kind of prospect is he? Great game against Georgia. Is he viewed as a first-round guy? We'll have that conversation. But there is no guarantee. He's just affirming that if he does get cleared to go back to college, he will go back to Ole Miss. He's not going to LSU or anywhere else. And so we'll just have to wait and see on that. But Simpson's going to be a name you and I will be talking about a lot come April.
Let's roll down real quick Jordan Reed's list of quarterback draft rankings going back to October 10th. Okay. Dante Moore, obvious. I mean, that he's still going to be involved. Mendoza, number 2, obviously going to be involved. He's got Lenore Sellers at number 3. Now, isn't he going back?
Yes, he's going back to South Carolina.
Ty Simpson at 4 is obviously coming out. Carson Beck at 5. He's done there, right? 6 years.
He'll be in the draft, but he's not going to be a first round pick. I doubt.
John Mateer.
Not sure Mateer's status, but not really getting first round.
He's a redshirt junior. He'd probably be behooved to stay, wouldn't he?
I hadn't watched enough, probably, but I think some will say it's a week 26 class, and some may want to try to get ahead of a perceived 2027 class that's good. Looks like I think Mateer's in the portal, maybe.
Okay, Nussmeier.
Horrible. No, he's done.
Drew Aller.
Hurt and terrible, and yeah, not a candidate.
Sam Levitt.
He's in the portal, I think, right? He's not going to be in the draft.
I haven't gone that far. Talon Green out of Arkansas, who I have not watched a bit of tape on. Josh Hoover at TCU. Trinidad Chambliss, 12. We just talked about him. Cade Klubnik, Clemson.
Yeah, he didn't have the year that he wanted to. I think there might be I might have some intrigue in Klubnik still. Hoover, by the way, is going to Indiana. He's going to replace Mendoza. I don't know if Mateer's in the portal or not. I was misled by a headline. So, but he's not a first round guy, I don't think.
And Arch Manning at 12th, and obviously he's staying at school.
Yeah, but that article was from October.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so much can and has changed since then, obviously. I mean, I looked at Mel Kiper's rankings of quarterbacks in, I think it was late December last year, that had Jackson Dart number 7 behind Quinn Ewers and people like that. And we know how things ended up in terms of where he went, how the NFL thought about him by April. So these rankings are still, I think, pretty fluid.
All right. So what I'm getting at still is, my thought is they're not going to be hard and heavy on a first-round quarterback.
They may not take one, but are you saying like they're not going to go to Alabama's pro day and have a pro day dinner with Ty Simpson and bring him in for a
No,
visit?
no,
Like,
and look, I'm got to dive deeper into the Simpson tape. I'm not convinced. Look, how many times have we seen quarterbacks go in the first round that you think, well, it's the position more so than are they deserving of the first round?
yeah, I'm not making any evaluation standpoint. I'm just saying the team is going to look at all these guys very strongly as they have for every season that they needed a quarterback, as
Okay.
they should. Like, how do you not look at quarterback whenever you don't have a quarterback in the future? Now, I mean, for a receiver, it's interesting. How many great receivers are there? Cardinal Tate, Ohio State will be talked about. He just declared KC Conception from A&M will get some looks. Pittsburgh historically, for whatever it's worth, not super big on the first round receivers. Holmes was the last one. I think Burris before him. So whatever that's worth.
And is Simpson making this decision because the class is so weak and he got the draft board grade that because of that he could potentially be a first rounder?
I'm sure they understood the landscape of the situation, but he wouldn't have declared if he didn't feel like he was going to be a good first-round pick or felt like he was sort of ready. I mean, he had a good year until that playoff game. Like, he was having a pretty strong season for Bama.
All right, Las Vegas and the Jets, they both got to go quarterback, right?
Assuming there's quarterbacks to take, I mean, Mendoza will go to the Raiders. Dante Moore still has to declare. We assume he's going to declare, and so, yes, I imagine the quarterbacks will be those taken by those two franchises.
And if Vegas and the Jets don't get Arizona's at 3, right?
Yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh's not getting Mendoza. They're not getting Dante Moore if he declares. It's safe to say those guys are not going to be options.
All right. So who's the next quarterback in the class? Simpson?
It's Ty Simpson. Yeah, it's Ty Simpson. Yeah, again, this is not the quarterback class is not particularly strong this year. There's no debating that. The question will be, though, will Pittsburgh still look at the options and the possibilities and the names? And I think they certainly will. Will they draft one? Who knows? But I think they certainly will have a close eye on those guys, very similar to last year.
I'm not saying they're not going to look at the class. I'm saying whether or not they're going to ultimately draft, be really hot and heavy to go get Simpson.
Do you think their posture is going to be the same as last year, though?
I mean, are they going to show up at the Clemson Pro Day? Yes.
Yeah, because they always show up there. They're always at the Bama Pro Day, but like they're going to court these quarterbacks. They're going to.
Okay.
You don't think they will?
Probably not the level that you think that they are. And look, we're talking about this obviously. I mean, he asked, so I thought I'd oblige him to where my thought process is right now.
Yeah. So you're thinking receiver is kind of the focus in terms of putting quarterback aside, regardless. Just assume they don't take one for whatever reason. You think receivers next in line?
I think so.
I'm debating that. It's certainly a big need, and how can it not be after kind of the last 2 years? But if Arthur Smith is still the OC, if Aaron Rodgers comes back, I wonder how that kind of all fits. I think they're going to draft a receiver. They're going to draft one earlier than later. Will it be first round? I don't know about first round.
Okay.
We'll see.
All right. Got through all the emails there. So write down what I said in case I'm right. All right. And we'll never talk about it again if I'm wrong. But
talk about what?
Okay. We will be back on Friday. Should be an interesting show because we won't have the beat writer on Friday for the Texans. That'll be Monday because of the Monday night game. So we'll have to figure out maybe. I've reached out to Joel Corey. Maybe I can get him scheduled for Friday. It still might be a little early to try to get him on. He couldn't do anything today. I tried to book him for today, and he was already booked up and all. So we'll come up with something to talk about on Friday. Heck, maybe we'll get more into a little bit of draft talk or something like that. But in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter/X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate, SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button, follow the directions that way, get a username and password, and follow the directions on how to use it. And that's got it. So until Friday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.